May 28, 2020 marks the 137th birth anniversary of Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, who is also known as Veer Savarkar. Earlier, his birth ceremony was confined to the four walls of RSS, but presently, as BJP is in power, the nation remembered him and his contribution to the freedom struggle. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar was a lawyer, politician, a writer and formulator of Hindutva philosophy. Today, on the occasion of his birth anniversary, if BJP was planning to honor their Hindutva ideologue, the Congress was bent upon criticizing Savarkar for the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi and questioning his contribution to the freedom struggle of India. Recently, a political controversy arose in Karnataka over the naming of a flyover. The present BJP government wanted to name it after Savarkar, but the move was opposed by the Congress and JD leaders. They wanted the bridge to be named after their own state leader and not after an outsider. With the result, the move to name the bridge after Savarkar was abandoned. Similarly, BJP leaders in Maharashtra wanted to honor Savarkar on his birth anniversary, but the move was opposed by the Congress. Former Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis informed the House about a magazine Shidori, a mouthpiece of the Congress. In the magazine, many baseless allegations were leveled against Savarkar. Fadnavis tore the copy of the Shidori publication in the House and demanded that the publication be banned and the writers arrested. Another Congress devotee, Sanjeev Chembulkar, wrote an article in Marathi publication with the title Andhe Til Savarkar or Savarkar in the Dark, raising many questions on the patriotism and integrity of the Savarkar with the intention to malign his image. National Congress Party has called for the withdrawal of the booklet distributed by Seva Dal, which questions Vinayak Damodar Savarkar credentials as patriot. Hindi booklet Veer Savarkar Kitne Veer was distributed by Congress-affiliated organization in Madhya Pradesh. The author questions the relevance of the very title Veer attached to the patriot. During his election campaign, Rahul Gandhi took jibe at Savarkar and publicly said that I am Rahul Gandhi and not Savarkar. As such, I will not ask for pardon. Congress Seva Dal Training Camp in Bhopal distributed a booklet in which Lalji Desai writes that Savarkar received a pension from the British and he further added that Savarkar was in physical relation with Nathuram Godse. Sanjay Rawat of Shiv Sena criticized its allies Congress for such derogatory remarks and called to ban the book as it exhibited weak psyche of the writer. Why so much hue and cry over the credentials of a person who gave up his formative years, bright future, and pushed his family into deep trouble by pursuing a career which had no future? His only felony was that he desired to see his motherland free from foreign rule. It is most unfortunate and regrettable that the suffering and sacrifice of such a person is looked with suspicion and his patriotism is put to question today. Veer Savarkar Kitne Veer? Was he a true patriot or not? Savarkar was suspected of 3 murder cases. First of Curzon Wily, second of A.M.T. Jackson, and third of Mahatma Gandhi. Curzon Wily was shot dead by a young man, Madan Lal Dhingra, who hailed from Punjab. He belonged to a rich family and had come to England for higher studies. At India House, Madan Lal Dhingra came in close contact with Savarkar and was influenced by his revolutionary views and plans to free India. It is alleged that under Savarkar's influence, he shot dead Curzon Wily, a close associate of his father, Sahib Datta Mal. The matter rested here only, as Madan Lal Dhingra admitted in the court that he committed the crime on his own, to teach his fellow comrades a method to free India from cruel British rulers. Second charge against Savarkar was an abetment to murder of Nasik collector A.M.T. Jackson. Anant Lakshman Kanhare, a 17-year-old student of Aurangabad, shot dead Jackson on 21st December 1909 at Nasik. It was alleged that the weapon used in the killing was sent by Savarkar from England to India, and for that he was tried and sentenced to 25 years of rigorous imprisonment. On 31st January 1948, Nathuram Godse shot dead Mahatma Gandhi, a liar, political leader, philosopher and a spiritual person who struggled and strived for the freedom of the country. The murder shook the nation and shocked the masses, as their Masiha had been killed by a fanatic Hindu who was closely associated with none other than but Savarkar. Godse and his accomplice Narayan Apte were convicted and hanged for the crime. Other 6 accused were given life sentence, but as nothing substantious could be found against Savarkar, he was set free. Savarkar was only a suspect in Curzon Wily and Gandhi's murder cases, and not a participant or instigator as it is proposed. In both the cases, his only fault was that he was closely associated with the assassins, and that doesn't hold him guilty of the crime. Both the convicts accepted their crime and did not name any other plotter. As such, it is not desirable to blame Savarkar for the crime to which he was not remotely connected. Let us have a brief look at the life sketch of Savarkar. Savarkar was born on 28th May 1883 in a middle-class family in Maharashtra. He began his political activities as a high school student and established a party, Mitra Mela. He continued to do so at Ferguson College in Pune. His elder brother Ganesh Savarkar was also involved in political activities, and both founded a society known as Abhinav Bharat. In 1906, Savarkar earned the scholarship started by Shyamji Krishna Varma to go to England for higher studies. At England, he took admission in Country's Inn to study law. He stayed at India House. India House was situated at Cromwell Avenue in Highgate, North London. It was purchased by lawyer Shyamji Krishna Varma with the sole purpose to promote nationalist views among the Indian students in Britain. Indian students were given free lodging at India House. Weekly meetings were arranged at India House, where gathering would swell to 20, 30 or even more. One person would deliver a talk, and afterwards the discussion on the topic would follow, ending with concluding remarks by the chief person. India House was a rendezvous for politically like-minded Indian youths and a training ground for prospective public men and revolutionaries. Shyamji Krishna Varma also started a journal known as the Indian Sociologist, but it was banned as it was considered seditious. Savarkar had become in charge of the political activities going on in India House. He started the Free Indian Society, and in December 1906 he opened a branch of Abhinav Bharat at India House. Savarkar translated Mazni's autobiography into Marathi and also wrote a book, The First War of India's Independence. The British government had claimed that 1857's uprising was mere a spy mutiny. Savarkar argued and tried to prove that it was not a spy mutiny, but the first war of India's independence against the British regime by the Indian rulers. He not only idealized the warriors of the uprising like Tantiya Tope, Rani Jhansi, Bahadur Shah, but also glorified their actions and presented them as the heroes of the uprising who fought bravely for the freedom of their country. Thus, he was able to present different view to the so-called Sepoy mutiny and helped in inculcating a spirit of nationalism among the countrymen. British government banned the book as it feared its publication, but Savarkar got it printed and distributed to his friends and supporters. The purpose behind the book was to present the heroic deeds of the Indian soldiers who fought bravely against the British rule at that time. In London, British government celebrated the victory of 1857 achieved 50 years ago in India. The newspapers carried stories of bravery of the British soldiers and on the other hand decried the cowardliness, selfishness and animosity of the Indian soldiers. On 1st May, a drama was staged in which Rani Jhansi, Tantiya Tope, Nana Sahib and other Indian warriors were shown as cruel rulers who looted their own people. This was a move to defame the Indian heroes and weaken the sentiments of the Indians in England. At India House, the newspaper coverage and the stage show was vehemently condemned, and it was decided to counter such move by organizing a similar kind of celebration at India House. It was decided that 10th May should be the date for the celebration. Savarkar was the master of the show. Invitations were sent to the fellow countrymen and their attendance was assured. Emily Brown writes, Savarkar staged an elaborate celebration of the 51st anniversary of the Indian national arising of 1857. Tributes were paid to the heroes of the mutiny, followed by the vote to abjure all pleasures and pastime and to contribute money to the fund for the heroes of the martyrs of 1857. The Times reported that more than 100 students from different universities, Oxford, Cambridge and even Edinburgh, were present at the celebration, which lasted for 4 hours and was concluded with the distribution of prasad, a ritual offering. India House was beautifully decorated with flowers and lights. The portraits of Bahadur Shah, Nana Sahib, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Raja Kanwar Singh, Maulvi Ahmad Shah and others were brilliantly portrayed and garlanded. Savarkar explained that his object in writing the book, The Indian War of Independence, was to inspire his people with a burning desire to use again and again and wage a second war and a successful war to liberate their motherland. Second objective was to place before the House an outline of the program and action plan to prepare them for future war of liberation. It was a great achievement on the part of Savarkar. India House had given a befitting reply to the British rulers in England that there was a section of Indian patriots who were preparing for India's independence. Savarkar had declared that Sepoy Mutiny was the first war of India's independence. Savarkar's move was condemned by the British press and it warned the government of coming catastrophe. Scotland Yard police became very panicky and they appointed an Indian spy at the India House to know the future plans of the people. In a span of 3 years, Savarkar had converted India House into a political arena where young people could sit together to discuss their mutual problems and plan about their country's freedom, a topic otherwise they would despise. Weekly discussions and exchange of different views further enhance their knowledge about country's problem and encourage them to look for its future solutions. These meetings helped in inculcating the spirit of nationalism among many. Madan Lal Dhingra too got inspired by such discussions and talks, and one day he planned to shoot Curzon Wily dead, along with Lal Kaka, who tried to stop him. It is alleged that Madan Lal Dhingra was under the influence of Savarkar, who prompted him to take such an action. Dhananjay Keer, Savarkar's biographer, also makes such a claim, but it is not correct. Whereas the assassination was being abhorred by almost every influential and important leader and organization, there was one group of revolutionaries in England which stood like a rock along Dhingra and his act. Shyamji Krishna Verma declared Madan Lal Dhingra a patriot and a martyr in a foreign land. Many before Dhingra had died unsung and unrecognized, but the Krishna Varma and Savarkar made it a point not to let his sacrifice go waste. The British government tried its level best to treat the murder episode as an act of an eccentric, without any particular rhyme and reason. It tried its level best to keep it in a low profile and not to add any political color to it, but others proved it other way round. Bhajan Lal, the younger brother of Madan Lal Dhingra, openly condemned the act of his brother and disassociated himself and his family from him. When a resolution was put to vote by Morrison to condemn the act of Madan Lal Dhingra, Savarkar opposed it. He was slapped, pushed down and thrown out of the meeting hall held at Caxton Hall on July 5th for his big no, wrote the Times. Savarkar replied, "It seemed to me an encroachment upon the assumption of the authority of the law courts to declare a man who is still under trial to be criminal. The man accused of the murder has made no confession, so it seemed to me more just and appropriate to omit the word crime and criminals from the resolution. Only a brave man like Savarkar could act so and expose himself to such a risk. Because when the murder had taken place in London, India House had been sealed and search was made. Many were arrested, but nothing could be found from India House. From legal point of view, Savarkar was right in his assertion because the case was in the court and such meetings had no right to pass aspersion on Dhingra as it could influence the judgment. A day before Dhingra's hanging, a statement appeared by David Garnett in the Daily News at the behest of Savarkar. Dhingra said, "The only lesson required in India at present is to learn how to die. And the only way to teach it is by dying ourselves. My only prayer to God is that I may be reborn of the same mother and I may re-die in the same sacred cause till the cause is successful. Bande Matram." A befitting tribute to the martyr who otherwise would have died as unknown entity, because in the court Madan Lal Dhingra wanted to read this will, but he was not allowed to do so. So Savarkar sneaked out that paper and published it in the newspaper. Savarkar went over to France and stayed there for a short while and soon came back to be arrested and deported on March 13, 1910. Madam Kama, Iyer and Krishna Varma had warned him and wanted him to stay back at France because he could have saved himself, but he did not bother because he was fearless and ready to face any sort of penalty. Savarkar had informed his friends to follow the ship because he would try to escape. At Marseille he tried and he was successful from escaping from the ship, but he was caught by the French police and handed over to the British police because his friends were late in reaching the site. In India, he was tried for the murder of A.T.M. Jackson and conspiracy to overthrow British Crown, for which he was sentenced to 50 years of harsh imprisonment and was deported to Andaman prison known as Kalapani, for which he was not ready. At Andaman prison, he was labelled as a D, dangerous prisoner, and was kept in a solitary confinement. He was deprived of any kind of consideration and relaxation otherwise shown to other such prisoners. The jail warden was always worried about Savarkar and feared lest he escape one day. As such, a close vigil was kept in a cell of 13.7 feet by 6.5 feet. Only twice he was allowed to go for nature's call. He was kept in solitary confinement as they wanted to break him psychologically and emotionally. The result was apparent. He was shaken, and as he could not see any ray of hope for freedom, he smartly maneuvered his stance and appealed for mercy. He acknowledged his mistake and promised to give up revolutionary methods in future and abide peaceful means for struggle. His elder brother Ganesh Savarkar was also serving his term in the same prison, but after a long interval, he got an opportunity to meet him. Savarkar remained at Andaman jail for 10 years. On 2nd May 1921, Savarkar brothers were removed from Andaman to Ratnagiri jail, where he wrote the book Hindutva, Who's a Hindu? 3 years later, the government put certain conditions on Savarkar for his release from Yarwada jail in Pune. These conditions were: Savarkar was to reside in Ratnagiri district. He could not go beyond the district limits without government's approval. He was not to engage in political activities publicly or privately. These restrictions were for 5 years, subject to renewal at the expiry of this period. Savarkar accepted these terms, and on 6th January 1924, Savarkar was released and provided a bungalow at Ratnagiri, where he was to stay. He was allowed to meet visitors, and he met there Mahatma Gandhi and Ambedkar. He remained confined to Ratnagiri for 13 years and was released from all restraints in 1937. It is an irony of fate that in 1906, both Madanlal Dhingra and Savarkar landed in England, and in the same year, Andaman prison started functioning. Madanlal Dhingra was hanged in 1909, and very next year, Savarkar started for the Kalapani. Savarkar was freed in 1937, and in 1938, Andaman prison was closed. Those who condemned Savarkar for pleading for his innocence failed to see the hardships and punishment which he went through. Any other prisoner would have gone insane. But he was a strong-willed person who braved all hardships. He knew that the only way left for him to get reprieve was to accept his involvement in the crime and plead for mercy. As such, he committed no crime in asking for clemency. Government had confiscated Savarkar's property and forced the family members to vacate the house. The whole family suffered due to their involvement in the crime. Veer Savarkar's only son Bhaskar had died. He met his wife after a decade in the prison in 1922. Eyeing political benefits from successive Congress regimes, the communist historians have been making repeated attempts to blemish the patriotic image of Veer Savarkar, citing 6 letters of clemency. Contrary to their false accusations, Mahatma Gandhi explains how Savarkar brothers were denied justice when majority of political prisoners received the benefit of royal clemency. As Gandhi hailed Savarkar, he was clever enough to take advantage of the situation wherein seeking clemency was the norm. That has been extended to most of the revolutionaries and political prisoners in the country during that period of time, as vouched for by Gandhiji. We forget one thing: it was not 5 years or 10 years sentence, but 50 long years sentence. The very thought of it breaks one's heart and spirit. His idea to blow up a British Parliament and explode simultaneous bombs at different places was considered very dangerous, and his daredevil effort to escape from the ship had cautioned British government, which treated him as a seasoned and a hardcore criminal. It is alleged by Azad Ashraf the condition in cellular jail in Andaman Island was undoubtedly horrific. For instance, Savarkar was yoked to the oil mill. Quite understandably, his revolutionary fervor fizzled out. It must, however, be pointed out that he wasn't the only person singled out for barbaric punishment. At least, author accepted the fact that punishment was barbaric, and Savarkar was not the only one to get it. True. But we should not forget that all can't bear the torture. Some people can face it for some time, but not for all the time. He did give in and decided to change his stance. Perhaps he never thought that he will be treated so cruelly as a prisoner. Had it been a simple confinement, he would have come back successfully. But consider it, 50 years is a long time for anyone to imagine himself behind bars. It is easier said than done. It is said, hope sustains life. And in case of Savarkar, even hope seems to have taken a flight. He was struggling within to find a way out from the dungeon, and seeking pardon was the only way left for him. After his release from Ratnagiri jail, Savarkar joined the Hindu Mahasabha. He was unanimously elected president of Hindu Mahasabha, and in 1937, and for the next 7 years, he remained so. The main drawback of Savarkar was that he was truthful and straightforward. He never bothered to hide his feelings either for Gandhi or Subhash Chandra Bose. If he did not like the Quit India movement, he openly criticized it, and similarly he opposed the appeasement policy of Gandhi of the Muslims. He openly admitted that partition of India is on the basis of religion, to which Congress objected. His Hindutva was meant for the original inhabitants of the land and not for foreign settlers. He described Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism and Buddhism as one and the same. He outlined his vision of a Hindu Rashtra, Hindu nation as Akhand Bharat, United India, purportedly stretching across the entire Indian subcontinent. He was a religious person and not a bigot who would follow the religious blindly. He accepted those religious practices which were based on logic and not on text. His main aim was to unite Hindus who had been divided due to caste abuse. He worked among the lower caste people and encouraged them to join school, a necessary element and solution for all the ills. He wanted to abolish untouchability and remove restrictions on intercaste dining, marriages, hereditary occupation, on-sea travel, on Vedic rites, and to reconversion. Those who had left Hinduism and embraced other religion were welcomed to Hindu fold by Savarkar. He supported many temple movements of Maharashtra where the untouchables were encouraged to pray, recite Sanskrit hymns and conduct Abhishek of Vishnu idol. He started a cafe in 1933 for Hindus of all castes, including untouchables. He had employed a person from Mahar caste to serve food there. He started the first pan-Hindu Ganesh Utsav in 1930. The festival was marked by kirtans by the untouchables. He wrote, "To regard our 70 million co-religious as untouchables and treat them as worse than animals is an insult not only to the humanity but also to the sanctity of our soul." Savarkar said, once the children are educated together, they will not observe caste hierarchy in the later life. He requested the government to do away with the titles. It is alleged that Savarkar asked Hindus to enlist themselves in British Army during Second World War. What wrong he did? The hidden agenda behind this move was to train Indians in the art of warfare so that when right time comes, they should be ready to fire the shot. Gandhiji asked Indians to support British during World War I with a hope to get constitutional concessions. Was that a right move? Gandhiji signed Khilafat Pact to unite Hindus and Muslims. Was it a right step? Intentions were right, but not the result. Should we call his move unpatriotic as it cost thousands of lives? Even during the World War II, he did not oppose the recruitment of the Indians to the army. Gandhiji pledged his personal support to the government and the allies, as he never wanted to take advantage of British weakness. Similarly, Savarkar tried to help them in the Second World War with a hope to gain concessions for the country. By doing so, he was not committing any offense or misleading his nation, cheating on any political party. He did what he thought was right. There was nothing unpatriotic in his action. We can say he did not toe the national party line of action and followed a different path, but that doesn't make him a criminal or a traitor as he is labeled. Savarkar, like other communal parties, was trying to strengthen his own community. Yes, we can call him short-sighted, as he was concerned about the safety and security of his community, that is, Hindus. As said earlier, there was no set formula to achieve independence. Young and old men were following the path which they thought could lead them to success. All were new to the job and had gathered knowledge either from the books or from the people around. If Savarkar was trying to win freedom through revolutionary means, then Subhash Chandra Bose decided to raise an army in the foreign land to attack his own country. What will the critics will call him? Is it true that it was due to the non-cooperation movement of Mahatma Gandhi and his call to quit India that British left India and granted it independence? Perhaps not. There were many reasons for British to leave India. Regardless of Gandhi or any other charismatic leader, Britain would have left India in 1947, purely for financial reasons due to its wholly collapsed economy. The Royal Indian Navy had mutinied. The famed Indian Army was getting increasingly polarized, and Britain was in no position to send more troops to other countries. Civil war loomed large. After World War II, Britain left not only India but nearly all its other holdings, including Jordan in 1946, Palestine in 1947, Sri Lanka in 1948, Myanmar in 1948, Egypt in 1952, Malaysia in 1957. For the same reason, France also had granted independence to Laos in 1949, Cambodia in 1953, and had to leave Vietnam in 1954. Netherlands also left most of the colonies called Dutch East Indies, mainly Indonesia, in 1949. Again, it is said, he remained true to his vow not to indulge in revolutionary activities. What else he could do? Could he dare to disobey the administration? All the time his movements were being watched. In such a situation, he decided to change his stance from revolutionary to a social reformer. Another blame is that he signed a humiliating code not known until Frontline magazine published in 1995. An additional undertaking. Savarkar agreed to give to the government that he had a fair trial and just punishment. What else he could say when the condition for his release was so? As for the allegation of physical relations is concerned, it's very disgraceful and uncalled for. One should think 10 times before pointing a finger on such a person who had an unblemished history. A passing reference was made by Dominic Lapere and Larry Collins in their most talked about book, Freedom at Midnight, published in 1975, as a passing reference. Savarkar died in 1966, as such it could not be collaborated, and in the second edition the matter had been deleted. Savarkar was not a historian, but he wrote an excellent work on history. Out of the ashes of the 1857 martyrs, he created legendary heroes who became the symbol of valor, courage, and heroism for the future young generation to follow. He created such an imagery of Bharat Mata for whom Indians were ready to fight and die. Humiliation and torture became part of his daily life, but the most embarrassing and degrading are the strictures attached to his name by his own countrymen for whom he had fought throughout his life. Until date, he is fighting to get what he deserved: a nationalist, a patriot, a wonderful leader, an excellent orator, a charismatic personality, and above all, a brave revolutionary who had the art to convert a meek man into daring lion who could roar and kill. He was a true patriot who suffered throughout his life and is still struggling to get justice. We should not forget that many Indian youth wanted to free their motherland from British rule. Some went alone like Madanlal Dhingra, Sardar Udham Singh to achieve the goal. Both killed British officers in order to avenge and teach their fellow comrades the art of getting freedom. Some organized themselves into groups like Jugantar, Hindustan Socialist Republic Association, Anushilan, Bharat, Naujawan Sabha, All India Forward Bloc, and planned murders, accumulated arms, manufactured bombs, committed robberies to promote the idea of liberation. Some became the member of the revolutionary parties abroad like Ghadar Association, USA, Berlin Committee for India's Independence, Germany, Indian Home Rule Society, London, Indian Independence League, USA, Abhinav Bharat Society, London. In the foreign land, these organizations found the idea of patriotism among their fellow men by educating them through newspapers, seminars, group meetings, and discussions. They launched their own press release and newspapers and magazines. Some passive supporters of the freedom movement supported them financially. Members of the Ghadar party had planned an armed uprising in India. They could not succeed. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose established the Indian National Army, Azad Hind Fauj, with the help of Germany and Japan to topple the British rulers in India. Amidst these revolutionaries, Mahatma Gandhi started his peaceful resistance as against the British regime. He strongly believed that through revolutionary means and armed insurrection, British rulers could not be defeated. The best way was to restrict them through passive resistance. It began with the non-cooperation movement in 1920-22, in unison with Khilafat movement. The civil disobedience movement 1930-31 unsuccessfully sought to be revived from 1932 to 1934, and the Quit India movement of 1942. Every individual and a member of a group or an organization worked for the freedom of the country. As such, they all were true patriot and nationalist. What tools they applied, which route they followed, how far they succeeded in their mission is another matter. As far as their sincerity, loyalty, commitment, and sacrifice towards the nation was concerned, it was incontestable. Today, we are eating the fruit of their struggle as an independent nation. It is easy to pass strictures and cast aspersions on others, but difficult to pass through those hard times which one suffered. It is easy to quote and unquote sitting in an air-conditioned offices, but very difficult to pull the trigger and to bear a shot and to face those tortures which those people suffered throughout their life. There is a certain group of critics, historians, and politicians who are allergic to Savarkar so much that very mention of his name invite frown on their face. They condemn every action of his, whether it was for the upliftment of the society or for the benefit of the downtrodden. If he works for the betterment of lower caste, he is declared as a selfish person who wants to gain name and fame in the society. If he was elected president of Hindu Mahasabha in 1937 and worked to unite Hindus, his critics declared him prejudiced, responsible for Hindu-Muslim divide. God be thanked he was not in India in 1907. Otherwise, he would have been made responsible for the birth of Muslim League also. If Mahatma Gandhi's Quit India movement of 1942 failed to take a start, it was due to Savarkar's opposition. He did not support the movement. He went against Gandhi, asked Hindus to stick to their post and help the government in recruitment. Why should he support Gandhi? Did Gandhi ask for his help? Savarkar had his own plan and strategy to fight the independence, while Gandhi was working on his own. Gandhi's Quit India movement failed to not because of Savarkar, but because farmer never wanted to disturb the British in the time of crisis as they were absorbed in the World War II, and to coerce them in such a situation was against his principles. It is alleged that Savarkar supported the government. Who didn't? Everyone wanted that British should win first and then they should decide about India's future. However, Congress party, which had won the elections with majority in 1939 elections, resigned in protest as Viceroy Lord Linlithgow declared India to be a participant in the Second World War without consulting them. The government was in no position to listen to such an opposition. As such, all important leaders were arrested and put behind the bar. This led to Hindu Mahasabha to joining hands with the Muslim League and other parties to form governments in certain provinces. Such coalition governments were formed in Sindh, Northwest provinces and Bengal. In Northwest Frontier Province, Hindu Mahasabha members joined hands with Sardar Aurangzeb Khan of Muslim League. In Bengal, Hindu Mahasabha joined hands with Krishak Praja Party and supported the ministry of Fazul Haq. Congress blames Savarkar for his anti-national role, which is not correct. Hindu Mahasabha was working as per their party stand to support the government at the time of crisis. Savarkar appreciated the successful functioning of the coalition government. If we delve deep, we find the same strategy was adopted by the Congress, which too was of the same opinion, not to embarrass the government for the time being. Gandhi was mild in his protest and soon he along with other Congress members was arrested and the movement slowed down. Historian Bipin Chandra writes, it was Savarkar and Golwalkar who carried out a campaign that Gandhi was anti-national, anti-Hindu, and that he was a lover of Islam and wanted India Islamized. His non-violence was meant of disarming of Hindus. These are baseless allegations and carry little weight. Gandhi himself was responsible for floating such an ideology among the masses. If we go by the events and actions of Gandhiji, the things become quite clear. He needed none to declare him a friend of Muslims or sympathetic towards Muslims, as his actions prove it so. During the World War I, Gandhiji supported British government with a hope for constitutional concessions, but he got disappointed. He signed Khilafat Pact with the fundamental organization which could not think beyond his religious gains. The move boomeranged. In 1926, a fanatic, Abdul Rashid, assassinated Hindu Mahasabha leader Swami Shraddhanand. Gandhiji openly said that Abdul Rashid is not at fault, but those people who are spreading communal hatred, they are at fault. This move could please his close friends who understood him well, but not the common man or the member of the Gurukul Kangadi. In Naukholi, riots broke out. A series of semi-riots organized broke out, and in those riots, many Hindus were killed. Women abducted, raped, and their houses looted. It is estimated that around 5,000 were killed and raped. 50,000 Hindu men and women were forcibly converted to Islam. When riots broke out in Naukhali, Gandhi tried to pacify Hindus and advised them to embrace their Muslim brothers, as vengeance results in counter-vengeance and only love and affection can bring peace. Gandhi might have been right in his own thinking, but to tell the Hindus who were destitute, sufferer at that time was not a correct move. During his speech at prayer meeting at Patna, March 5, 1947, he said, "We ought to overcome violence by love. true. Those who cry for avenging Nakholi in Bihar do not know the meaning of vengeance. Is it manliness to return barbarism for barbarism? Was Gandhi saying. What Gandhi was trying to make them understand was creating more misunderstanding and increasing hatred among tortured, destitute, and helpless Hindus. It is not everybody's cup of tea to understand Gandhi. As such, every action of Gandhi towards Muslim was misunderstood and misrepresented. Gandhi emerged as the lover and leader of the Muslims, then of Hindus, which is not true. Accepted. He wanted to keep India united, but could not, as the leaders of the Congress and Muslim League were more concerned with their personal benefits than the unity of the nation. Gandhi, along with his ideology, was sent to far-off places like Bengal and Bihar to pacify Hindus and Muslims, and in Delhi, Congress leaders and Muslim League leaders were busy in dividing the country into two nations. In reality, Gandhi opposed the partition till the very end. However, Congress leadership had increasingly sidelined him by the end of 1946. Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Patel had accepted the idea of partition without even the courtesy of consulting Gandhi. Eventually, the Congress Working Committee accepted the Mountbatten Plan to divide India into two nations. On the morning of June 3, 1947, the day partition plan was announced, Gandhi told Rajendra Prasad, "I can see evil in the plan." Reacting to a question by a reporter whether he would undertake a fast to prevent partition, Gandhi uncharacteristically objected and replied, "If the Congress commits to an act of madness, does it mean that I should die?" Patel was convinced, as he later stated, that if India is to remain united, it must be divided. Nehru was also eventually convinced that partition was a necessary evil in order to neutralize Jinnah's nuisance value and to establish a strong and centralized Indian state, which would not have been possible with Muslim League ministers in office in undivided Punjab and Bengal.